My parents stole my college fund to pay for my brother's influencer career. They called me a bad investment. Today, my brother is in jail and they need lawyer fees. I replied, I only invest in winners. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. My father, Mark, had called me screaming for $60,000 in bail money, desperate and frantic. But my pulse didn't spike, my hands didn't shake. I simply reviewed the mental spreadsheet of our relationship, realized the account was overdrawn, and waited for him to realize the power had finally shifted. The air conditioning in my Austin home office hummed a low, steady note, the only sound in the room, until my father's voice shattered the peace. Through the phone, I could hear chaos in the background, police radio chatter, maybe even Dylan sobbing. It was a cacophony of failure, loud and messy, invading the pristine silence I had spent 5 years building. I looked around my desk. Everything was in its place. My dual monitors displayed rows of perfectly balanced data, quarterly projections for a client who valued precision over personality. A ceramic coaster held my iced coffee, condensation beating but never touching the walnut surface. This room was a temple to order, and on the other end of the line, my father was trying to burn it down. Avery, are you listening to me? He shouted, his voice cracking with a panic I hadn't heard since I was 18. They're processing him right now. Bail is set at 60,000. We need a retainer for the lawyer too. You have to wire it today, right now. I didn't answer immediately. I took a slow sip of my coffee. It was cold, bitter, and grounding. Did you hear me? He screamed. Your brother is in a holding cell. He's scared. He's just a kid. He is 24, Dad, I said. My voice was level, stripped of inflection. It wasn't the voice of a daughter. It was the voice of an auditor finding a discrepancy in the ledger. He isn't a kid. He's a grown man who committed wire fraud. It was a misunderstanding, my father insisted, desperation slurring his words. The haters reported him. It'll be cleared up. We just need to get him out first. We don't have the liquidity right now. You know that. But you do. We know you do. There it was, the entitlement, the assumption that my resources were merely a backup server for their crashed system. They didn't know I had the money because I flaunted it. They knew because they assumed that since I didn't spend it on leased Lamborghinis or trips to Miami, it must be sitting there waiting for them to claim. I glanced at the spreadsheet on my left monitor, my personal net worth tracker, compounding interest, steady index fund growth. Thousands of hours of boring, unglamorous work, late nights reconciling decimals everyone else missed, a fortress built brick by brick to keep people like them out. I am not wiring $60,000, I said. What? The word came out as a gasp. Avery, this is your brother. He could go to prison. Then he should have thought about that before selling fake courses to teenagers, I replied. I don't have $60,000 for bail, Dad. I have $60,000 for my future. Those are two different line items. You selfish, ungrateful. I'm hanging up now, I said, cutting him off. Do not call me again unless you are ready to apologize. Don't you dare hang. I tapped the red icon. The screaming stopped instantly. Silence rushed back in, cool and heavy. I stared at my phone, waiting for the guilt to arrive, the shaking hands, the tears, the reflex to fix everything. But the data didn't support that reaction. My heartbeat stayed slow. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the disappointment. I felt like the CEO of my own life, and I had just fired a toxic client. I turned back to my monitors and went back to work. The silence wasn't empty. It was filled with the ghosts of a conversation from 4 years ago. The day I realized my family didn't see me as a person, but a hedge fund they could liquidate whenever the market turned. I was 23, standing in a bank lobby holding a piece of paper that made no sense. I had gone to withdraw tuition for my final year of grad school. I'd been saving since 16, summer jobs, tutoring, hoarding birthday checks. The account should have held $12,000. Instead, the balance read $42.16. I didn't scream. Screaming is an inefficient use of energy when damage is irreversible. I drove to my parents' house, the paper folded neatly in my pocket. They were in the living room. Dylan was there too, scrolling on his phone, ignoring the tension. Where is it? I asked. I didn't have to specify. My mother, Elaine, didn't look up from her magazine. We had to make a strategic move, Avery. We transferred the assets. Assets, I repeated. That was my education. That was my life. It was family money, my father said, standing to loom over me, and we invested it where it would get the highest return. Look at your brother. I did. Dylan wore a designer hoodie that cost more than my first car. In the driveway sat a leased Ferrari he couldn't drive because he didn't know stick shift. Dylan is building a brand, my father said, pride spilling from a place he never offered me. The car, the trips, the followers.
It takes money to make money. He's going to be the next big thing, millions. You spent my tuition on bot followers and a rental car, I said. The math was horrifyingly simple. It's an investment, my mother snapped. And what were you going to do with it? Get another degree? Data analytics? That's boring. It's slow money. You're playing it safe. Then my father delivered the line I engraved on my heart like a tombstone. He looked at me with pity that burned worse than hatred. We bet on the horse that's going to win. You're safe, honey. But in this economy, safe is a bad investment. For years, I wondered why I didn't walk out then, why I finished my degree on loans, why I kept coming to holidays. It wasn't weakness. It was the invisible chain of the survivor. In a house of chaotic dreamers, someone becomes the designated stabilizer. I believed my stability kept the roof from collapsing. I thought endurance was love. Sitting in my office now with $60,000 secure in my account and my brother in a cell, I finally saw the truth. I wasn't their anchor. I was their insurance policy. They didn't appreciate stability. They resented it until the moment they needed to cash it in. They assumed I would always absorb the cost of their delusions. They forgot the most basic rule of investing. Past performance does not guarantee future results. And today, the market had finally crashed. The silence from my phone didn't last. Denial never does. Reality always kicks the door in. First came the texts, lighting up my screen like a slot machine hitting a jackpot of guilt. Mom, I can't believe you're doing this. He's your brother. Dad, we sacrificed everything for you. Is this how you repay us, by letting your family rot? Avery, people are talking. What do we tell them? That our daughter is a traitor? I didn't reply. Engaging with spam only confirms the address is active. I archived the messages into a folder labeled Evidence. Then came the flying monkeys. That afternoon, my Aunt Carol called my office line. I hadn't spoken to her in 3 years, not since she told me at Thanksgiving that I lacked vision because I wouldn't invest in her wellness supplement pyramid. Avery, she said, voice dripping with concern. Your mother called me in tears. She says you're refusing to help Dylan. Honey, you have to understand. He's an artist, a creator. People like him need support from people like us, the steady ones. He committed wire fraud, Aunt Carol, I said, typing an email while I spoke. He sold a passive income course that didn't exist to 500 people. That's not art, that's theft. It's a misunderstanding, she snapped, just like when Steve Jobs got fired. Genius is always persecuted. And honestly, it's not very becoming of you to be so jealous. Just because Dylan shines brighter doesn't mean you need to put out his light. I hung up. The real escalation happened 2 days later. I walked out of my office building and found my parents standing by my car. They weren't there to apologize. They were there to ambush. My mother looked frantic, designer sunglasses holding back perfectly highlighted hair they couldn't afford. My father looked furious, face red, veins bulging. You blocked us, my mother accused, stepping into my space. We've been calling for 48 hours. Because I gave you an answer, I said. The answer was no. You don't get to say no, my father shouted, slamming his hand on the roof. A few people turned to stare. We invested everything in him, everything. Do you know what happens if he goes to prison? The brand dies, the sponsorships, the potential deals, it all goes to zero. It's already at zero, I said, meeting his eyes. It was never real. The followers were bots, the sponsorships were fake. He was bleeding money. That's a lie, my mother screamed. He just needed a longer runway. He was this close. If you had supported him 4 years ago, if you hadn't been so selfish with that college fund, he'd be a millionaire by now. This is your fault. You starved his dream. I looked at them and felt colder than their anger. I saw belief, not lying, delusion. They had poured every dollar, every hope, every ounce of identity into the idea that Dylan was special and I was the resource. To admit Dylan was a criminal would mean admitting they had bet their lives on a lie. They were trapped in a sunk cost fallacy so deep it had become reality. You have savings, my father demanded, voice dropping. I know you do. You live small, you hoard it. Liquidate your portfolio, sell the house if you have to. Family sacrifices for the dream. My dream, I said softly, is to never be like you. I got in the car and locked the doors. In the mirror, I saw two people screaming at a vehicle already gone, still waiting for a payout that was never coming. That drive home was the last time I allowed anger. Anger clouds judgment. I needed clarity. I went straight to my home office and locked the door. I didn't turn on the warm reading lamp. I flipped on the overhead LEDs, clinical and unforgiving. I cracked my knuckles and opened a fresh browser window. I stopped seeing them as my parents and Dylan as my brother. I treated them like a distressed company suspected of embezzlement. I no longer was a daughter grieving a relationship. I was an auditor conducting an autopsy. I started with public records. Dylan's arrest was everywhere. The indictment had been unsealed that morning. I paid the access fee and downloaded the 80-page document. As I read, the picture shifted from pathetic to horrifying. It wasn't just wire fraud. It was a Ponzi scheme wrapped in influencer gloss. Dylan sold equity in his personal brand, promising 20% monthly returns based on future ad revenue. There was no ad revenue. Sponsorships were fabricated in Photoshop. I scrolled to the funds flow. The dates were familiar, too familiar. The scheme began 4 years ago, the same month my parents told me my college fund was gone. I pulled my old bank statements. August 12th, $12,000 withdrawn. August 14th, Dylan's LLC issued its first dividend to early investors. My stomach went cold. They hadn't stolen my money for a car, they'd used it to pay the first victims. My tuition was seed capital for a crime. The indictment listed unindicted co-conspirators. 2 individuals who hosted wealth seminars in their living room, vouched for Dylan's genius, recruited friends, neighbors, church members. I didn't need to guess. The LLC registration listed managing partners, Mark and Elaine. They weren't just enabling parents, they were participants, recruiters. They sold lies to people they knew, knowing the only real money came from their daughter. Everything clicked. The frantic calls, the ambush, the demand to liquidate my life. They weren't bailing out a son, they were buying silence. They weren't afraid for him, they were afraid for themselves. I printed the indictment, the LLC filings, the transfer timeline, stacked them neatly. A paper trail of betrayal. My phone buzzed again. A text from my father. "Please, Avery, we can explain. Come over. Let's figure this out as a family." I looked at the stack. I wasn't going there to figure anything out. I was going to close the account. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The landscaping was overgrown. The illusion of wealth was cracking. I used my old key and stepped into stale air. They were on the beige sectional, my mother clutching tissues, my father slumped. A flicker of arrogance crossed his face when he saw me. "You came," he said. "Good. We need to move fast. The lawyer says if we—" "Stop." I dropped the papers onto the coffee table. The thud echoed. "What is this?" my mother asked. "The indictment, the LLC registration, the bank transfers." My father went pale. He didn't touch them. "It got out of hand," my mother whispered. "We just wanted to help him." "You wanted to get rich quick," I said, "and you used my future as the down payment." "We did it for the family," my father exploded. Dylan, was our ticket out. He was going to take care of us, of you." "I took care of myself," I said, "without stealing." "You were a bad investment," he shouted. "You were safe, boring. You were never going to put our name on a building." "And look where that got you," I said, gesturing to the papers. "Your winner is in a cell and you're about to join him." My mother sobbed. "Please, we can't go to jail. You're the smart one. You always fix things." The irony suffocated me. Now my intelligence mattered. "I can't fix this," I said, "and I wouldn't if I could." He stepped toward me. "I am not ungrateful," I said, steady. "I'm grateful. You taught me that value isn't flash or hype. It's integrity." I looked at them, 2 people standing in the ruins of a fantasy. "I only invest in winners," I said, "and you've lost everything." I turned to the door. "If you walk out, you're dead to us," my mother screamed. I paused. "I was dead to you 4 years ago. This is just the funeral." I closed the door. Sirens wailed in the distance. The fallout was swift and public. Dylan pleaded guilty to wire fraud and money laundering for a lighter sentence that still meant 4 years in federal custody. My parents were indicted on conspiracy and securities fraud.
assets frozen, home seized, reputation reduced to zero. I didn't attend sentencing. The transcripts gave me the data without the emotional overhead. 6 months later, I sit on my patio watching the Texas sunset. My phone is silent. No demands, no guilt. Just the quiet hum of a life that belongs to me. I think about that insult, bad investment. It doesn't hurt. It reveals how hollow they were. They spent their lives trying to have instead of be. They rented authority and financed dignity. Power bought on credit is vulnerability waiting to be exposed. When the money ran out, they lost themselves. My life isn't flashy. My car is 5 years old. My home is comfortable. My work is invisible to some, tedious to others, but it's real. My net worth isn't a projection. It's discipline. They called me boring. They called me safe. They were wrong. Boring is freedom. Safe is sleeping through the night without fearing a knock on the door. I invested in myself, in integrity, in the slow process of building character that survives a crash. They chased the wind and ended with nothing. I stayed grounded, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. And as the stars come out, I know the truth. I didn't just survive them, I outperformed them. If this story resonated, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with friends who need to hear it, and comment your perspective or the key lesson you took away.